Hello, hello, going on, yo? How's everybody doing? Hope y'all are good. What's up, Ultima? Hey, Carl. I don't know if you're still here, but hello. It was weird taking a break yesterday. I'll be honest. I been grinding Elden Ring every single day for the past couple weeks, and then took a day to just hang out. Weird. Alright, so, let's kick into all the reading. We're gonna do about an hour like we usually do, and then we're gonna, probably do some Elden Ring or just hanging out and talking, after the reading. Basically, from what I remember from last week for reading was, we found out the answer to everything, which is 42, right? And, that took like a million years or millions of years for them to figure out. After that, they basically were like, that doesn't make any fucking sense, you know? And so then he was like, well, it makes sense if you know what the question is. And then they were like, well, what's the question? And then he was like, I don't know. He's like, I can't tell you that. So, yes, Elden Ring, yes. But yeah, so basically, eventually he said, like, the only person that can answer that or that can give you the question is the next computer that follows me, which is going to be the Earth. So, as we know now, like, the Earth got destroyed, but they're trying to rebuild it and make Earth 2.0. The mice are, because the mice are in control of everything. But, yeah. So, he pretty much said that, and then, like, everything kind of went crazy. Right now, the mice are trying to get Arthur's brain because he's like one of the last descendants from Earth. So like he's like super valuable since like everybody on Earth is extinct now, you know. And that's pretty much where we're at, is everybody's just kind of like running around going crazy and trying to escape. So with that being said, let me pull up the old book here. Chapter 32. Emergency! Emergency! Blared the klaxons throughout Magrathia. Hostile ship has landed on planet. Armed intruders in Section 8 Alpha. Defense stations. Defense stations. The two mice sniffed irritably around the fragments of their glass transports where they lay shattered on the floor. Damnation! Muttered Frankie Mouse. All that fuss over 2 pounds of earthling brain. He scuttled around about, and his pink eyes flashing, his fine white coat bristling with static. The only thing we can do now, said Benji, crouching and stroking his whiskers in thought, is to try and fake a question. Invent one that will sound plausible. Difficult, said Frankie. He thought. How about, what's yellow and dangerous? Benji considered this for a moment. No, no good, he said. Doesn't fit the answer. They sank into silence for a few seconds. All right, said Benji. What do you get if you multiply 6 by 7? No, too literal, too factual, said Frankie. Wouldn't sustain the punter's interest. Again they thought. Then Frankie said, Here's a thought. How many roads must a man walk down? Ah, said Benji. Aha, now that does sound promising. He rolled the phrase around a little. Yes, he said. That's excellent. Sounds very significant about actually tying you down to meaning anything at all. How many roads must a man walk down? 42. Excellent, excellent. That'll fox him. Frankie, baby, we are made. They performed a scampering dance in their excitement. Near them on the floor lay several rather ugly men who had been hit about the head with some heavy design awards. Half a mile away, 4 figures pounded up a corridor looking for a way out. They emerged into a wide, open-plan computer bay. They glanced about wildly. Which way you reckon, Zaphod? Said Ford. At wild guess, I'd say down here, said Zaphod, running off down to the right between a computer bank and the wall. As the others started after him, he thought he was brought up short by a kilozap energy bolt that cracked through the air inches in front of him and fried a small section of adjacent wall. A voice on a bullhorn said, Okay, Beeblebrox, hold it right there. We've got you covered. Cops! Hissed Zaphod, and spun around in a crouch. You want to say a guess at all, Ford? You want to try a guess at all, Ford? Okay, this way, said Ford, and the 4 of them ran down a gangway between 2 computer banks. At the end of the gangway appeared a heavily armored and spacesuited figure waving his vicious killozap gun. "We don't want to shoot you, Beeblebrox," shouted the feature. "Suits me fine," shouted Zaphod back, and dived down a wide gap between two data process units. The others swerved in behind him. "There are two of them," said Trillian. "We're cornered." They squeezed themselves down in an angle between a large computer databank and the wall. They held their breath and waited. Suddenly, the air exploded with energy bolts as both the cops opened fire on them simultaneously. "Hey, they're shooting at us," said Arthur, crouching in a tight ball. "I thought they said they didn't want to do that." "Yeah, I thought they said that," agreed Ford. Zaphod stuck a head up for a dangerous moment. "Hey," he said, "I thought you said you didn't want to shoot us," and ducked again. They waited. After a moment, a voice replied, "It isn't that easy being a cop." "What did he say?" whispered Ford in astonishment. "He said it isn't that easy being a cop." "Well, surely that's his problem, isn't it?" "I'd have thought so." Ford shouted out, "Hey, listen. I think we got enough problems of our own having you shooting at us, so if you could avoid laying your problems on us as well, I think we'd all find it easier to cope." Another pause, and then the bullhorn again. "Now see here, guy," said the voice. "You're not dealing with any dumb 2-bit trigger-pumping morons with low hairlines, little piggy eyes, and no conversation. We're a couple of intelligent, caring guys that you'd probably quite like if you met us socially. I don't go around graciously shooting people and then bragging about it afterward in seedy Space Rangers bars, like some cops I could mention. I go around shooting people graciously and then I agonize about it afterward for hours to my girlfriend." "And I write novels," chimed in the other cop, "though I haven't had any of them published yet, so I better warn you, I'm in a mean mood." Ford's eyes popped halfway out of their sockets. "Who are these guys?" he said. "Dunno," said Zaphod. "I think I preferred it when they were shooting." "So are you going to come quietly?" shouted one of the cops again, "or are you going to let us blast you out?" "Which would you prefer?" shouted Ford. A millisecond later, the air about them started to fry again, as bolt after bolt of kilozap hurled itself into the computer bank in front of them. The fusillade continued for several seconds at unbearable intensity. When it stopped, there were a few seconds of near quietness as the echoes died away. "You still there?" called one of the cops. "Yes," they called back. "We didn't enjoy doing that at all," shouted the other cop. "We could tell," shouted Ford. "Now listen to us, Beeblebrox, and you better listen good." "Why?" shouted back Zaphod. "Because," shouted the cop, "it's going to be very intelligent and quite interesting and humane. Now, either you all give yourselves up now and let us beat you up a bit, though not very much, of course, because we're firmly opposed to needless violence, or we blow up this entire planet and possibly one or two others we noticed on our way out of here." "But that's crazy!" cried Trillian. "You couldn't do that." "Oh yes, we would," shouted the cop. "Wouldn't we?" he asked the other one. "Oh yes, we'd have to, no question," the other one called back. "But why?" demanded Trillian. "Because there are some things you have to do even if you're an enlightened liberal cop who knows all about sensitivity and everything." "I just don't believe these guys," muttered Ford, shaking his head. One cop shouted to the other, "Shall we shoot them again for a bit?" "Yeah, why not?" They let fly another electric barrage. The heat and noise was quite fantastic. Slowly, the computer bank was beginning to disintegrate. The front had almost all melted away, and thick rivulets of molten metal were winding their way back toward where they were squatting. They huddled further back and waited for the end. End of Chapter 32. Chapter 33. But the end never came, at least not then. Quite suddenly, the barrage stopped, and the sudden silence afterward was punctuated by a couple of strangled gurgles and thuds. The four stared at each other. "What happened?" said Ford. "They stopped," said Zaphod with a shrug. "Why?" "Dunno, do you want to go and ask him?" "No." They waited. "Hello?" called out Ford. No answer. "That's odd. Perhaps it's a trap." "They haven't the wit." "What were those thuds?" "I don't know." They waited for a few more seconds. "Right," said Ford. "I'm going to have a look." He glanced around at the others. "Is no one going to say, 'No, you can't possibly, let me go instead'?" They all shook their heads. "Oh well," he said, and stood up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, after a second or so, Nothing continued to happen. Ford peered through the thick smoke that was billowing out of the burning computer. Cautiously, he stepped out into the open. Still nothing happened. 20 yards away, he could dimly see through the smoke the space-suited figure of one of the cops. He was lying on a crumpled heap on the ground. 20 yards in the other direction lay the second man. No one else was anywhere to be seen. This struck Ford as being extremely odd. Slowly, nervously, he walked out toward the first one. The body lay reassuringly still as he approached it, and continued to lie reassuringly until, as he reached it and put his foot down on the kill-zap gun that still dangled from its limp fingers. He reached down and picked it up, meeting no resistance. The cop was quite clearly dead. A quick examination revealed him to be from Blagulon Kappa. He was a methane-breathing life form, dependent on his spacesuit for survival in the thin oxygen atmosphere of Magrathia. The tiny life support system computer on his backpack appeared unexpectedly to have blown up. Ford poked around it in considerable astonishment. These miniature suit computers usually had the full backup of the main computer back on the ship, with which they were directly linked through the sub-ether. Such a system was fail-safe in all circumstances other than total feedback malfunction, which was unheard of. He hurried over to the prone figure and discovered that exactly the same impossible thing had happened to him, presumably simultaneously. He called the others over to look. They came, shared his astonishment, but not his curiosity. "Let's get shot of this hole," said Safad. "If whatever I'm supposed to be looking for is here, I don't want it." He grabbed the second kill-zap gun, blasted a perfectly harmless accounting computer, and rushed out into the corridor, followed by the others. He very nearly blasted hell out of an air car that stood waiting for them a few yards away. The air car was empty, but Arthur recognized it as belonging to Slaughter Bartfist. It had a note from him pinned to part of its sparse instrument panel. The note had an arrow drawn on it, pointing at one of the controls. It said, "This is probably the best button to press." End of Chapter 33. Chapter 34. The aircar rocketed them at speeds in excess of R-17 through the steel tunnels that led out onto the appalling surface of the planet, which was now in the grip of yet another drear morning twilight. Ghastly gray light congealed on the land. R is a velocity measure defined as a reasonable speed of travel that's consistent with health, mental well-being, and not being more than, say, 5 minutes late. It's therefore clearly an almost infinitely variable figure according to circumstances, since the first two factors may not vary not only with speed taken as an absolute, but also with awareness of the third factor. Unless handled with tranquility, this equation can result in considerable stress, ulcers, and even death. R-17 is not a fixed velocity, but it is clearly far too fast. The aircar flung itself through the air at R-17 and above, deposited them next to the Heart of Gold, which stood starkly on the frozen ground like a bleached bone, and then precipitately hurled itself back in the direction whence they had came, presumably on important business of its own. Shivering, the four of them stood and looked at the ship. Beside it stood another one. It was the Blagulon Kappa police craft, a bulbous shark-like affair, slate green in color, and smothered with black stenciled letters of varying degrees of size and unfriendliness. The letters informed anyone who cared to read them as to where the ship was from, what section of the police it was assigned to, and where the power feeds should be connected. It seemed somehow unnaturally dark and silent, even for a ship whose two-man crew was at that moment lying asphyxiated in a smoke-filled chamber several miles beneath the ground. It's one of those curious things that is impossible to explain or define, but one can sense when a ship is completely dead. Ford could sense it and found it most mysterious. A ship and two policemen seemed to have gone spontaneously dead. In his experience, the universe simply didn't work like that. The other three could sense it too. They could sense the bitter cold even more, and hurried back into the Heart of Gold, suffering from an acute attack of no curiosity. Ford stayed and went to examine the Blagulon ship. As he walked, he nearly tripped over an inert steel figure lying face down in the cold dust. "Marvin!" he exclaimed. "What are you doing?" "Don't feel you have to take any notice of me, please," came a muffled drum. "But how are you, Metal Man?" said Ford. "Very depressed." "What's up?" "I don't know," said Marvin. "I've never been there." Why, said Ford, squatting down beside him and shivering, are you lying face down in the dust? It's a very effective way of being wretched, said Marvin. Don't pretend you want to talk to me. I know you hate me. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Everybody does. It's part of the shape of the universe. I only have to talk to somebody, and they begin to hate me. Even robots hate me. If you just ignore me, I expect I shall probably go away. He jacked himself up to his feet and stood resolutely facing the opposite direction. That ship hated me, he said dejectedly, indicating the police craft. That ship? Said Ford in sudden excitement. What happened to it, do you know? It hated me because I talked to it. You talked to it? Exclaimed Ford. What do you mean you talked to it? Simple. I got very bored and depressed, so I went and plugged myself into its external computer feed. I talked to the computer at great length and explained my view of the universe to it, said Marvin. What happened? Pressed Ford. It committed suicide, said Marvin, and stalked off back to the Heart of Gold. End of chapter 34. Chapter 35. That night, as the Heart of Gold was busy putting a few light years between itself and the Horsehead Nebula, Safad lounged under the small palm tree on that bridge, trying to bang his brain into shape with massive pan-galactic gargle blasters. Ford and Trillian sat in a corner discussing life and matters arising from it, and Arthur took to his bed to flip through Ford's copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Since he was going to have to live in the place, he reasoned, he'd better start finding out something about it. He came across this entry. It said, "The history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through three distinct and recognizable phases, those of survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where shall we have lunch?" He got no further before the ship's intercom buzzed into life. "Hey, Earthman, you hungry, kid?" said Safad's voice. Well, yes, a little peckish, I suppose," said Arthur. "Okay, baby, hold tight," said Safad. "We'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe." End of chapter 35, and end of the first book of the first novel, or the first story of 5 stories that are in this book, which is, this one was called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Next one's going to be The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Following that is Life, the Universe, and Everything. So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. Young Safad plays it safe and mostly harmless. Billy Ways! Yeah, so the first book with 42 and all that stuff, that was like, that's the most that I remember from like anything. Like the movie that I watched or like hearing about it or anything. So all this stuff is going to be new for me. So I'm excited. That'd be cool. Dun, da, da, da. What are we at? 30 minutes. Cool. Yeah, we can start the next one too. We got time. Alright. The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. There's a theory which states that if ever anyone discovers exactly what the universe is for and why it is here, it will instantly disappear and be replaced by something even more bizarre and inexplicable. There is another which states that this has already happened. Chapter 1. The story so far. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and been wildly regarded as a bad move. Many races believe that it was created by some sort of god, though the Jatrafardid people of Vidfodil 6 believe that the entire universe was in fact sneezed out of the nose of a being called the Great Green Arcleseizure. The Jatrafardids, who live in perpetual fear of the time they call the coming of the Great White Handkerchief, are small blue creatures with more than 50 arms each, who are therefore unique in being the only race in history to have invented the aerosol deodorant before the wheel. However, the Great Green Arcleseizure theory is not widely accepted outside Vidfodil 6, and so, the universe being the puzzling place it is, other explanations are constantly being sought. For instance, A race of hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings once built themselves a gigantic supercomputer called Deep Thought to calculate once and for all the question to the ultimate answer of life, the universe, and everything. For 7.5 million years, Deep Thought computed and calculated, and in the end, announced that the answer was in fact 42. And so another, even bigger computer had to be built to find out what the actual question was. And this computer, which was called the Earth, was so large that it was frequently mistaken for a planet, especially by the strange ape-like beings who roamed its surface, totally unaware that they were simply part of a gigantic computer program. And this is very odd, because without that fairly simple and obvious piece of knowledge, nothing that ever happened on the Earth could possibly make the slightest bit of sense. Sadly, however, just before the critical moment of readout, the Earth was unexpectedly demolished by the Vogons to make way, so they claimed, for a new hyperspace bypass, and so all hope of discovering a meaning for life was lost forever. Or so it would seem. Two of these strange ape-like creatures survived. Arthur Dent escaped at the very last moment because an old friend of his, Ford Prefect, suddenly turned out to be from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse, and not from Guildford as he had hitherto claimed, and more to the point, he knew how to hitch rides on flying saucers. Tricia McMillan, or Trillian, had skipped the planet 6 months earlier with Zaphod Beeblebrox, the then president of the galaxy. 2 survivors. They are all that remains of the greatest experiment ever conducted, to find the ultimate question and the ultimate answer of life, the universe, and everything. And, less than 500,000 miles from where their starship is drifting lazily through the inky blackness of space, a Vogon ship is moving slowly toward them. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Like all Vogon ships, it looked as if it had been not so much designed as congealed. The unpleasant yellow lumps and edifices which protruded from it at unsightly angles would have disfigured the looks of most ships, but in this case, that was sadly impossible. Uglier things have been spotted in the skies, but not by reliable witnesses. In fact, to see anything much uglier than a Vogon ship, you would have to go inside it and look at a Vogon. If you're wise, however, this is precisely what you will avoid doing, because the average Vogon will not think twice before doing something so pointlessly hideous that you will wish you had never been born, or, if you are a clearer-minded thinker, that the Vogon had never been born. In fact, the average Vogon probably wouldn't even think once. They are simple-minded, thick-willed, slug-brained creatures, and thinking is not really something they are cut out for. Anatomical analysis of the Vogon reveals that its brain was originally a badly deformed, misplaced, and dyspeptic liver. The fairest thing you can say about them, then, is that they know what they like, and what they like generally involves hurting people and, wherever possible, getting very angry. One thing they don't like is leaving a job unfinished, particularly this Vogon, and particularly, for various reasons, this job. This Vogon was Captain Prosenic Vogon Jeltz of the Galactic Hyperspace Planning Council, and he it was who had the job of demolishing the so-called planet Earth. He heaved his monumentally vile body around in his ill-fitting, slimy seat, and stared at the monitor screen on which the starship Heart of Gold was being systematically scanned. It mattered little to him that the Heart of Gold, with its infinite improbability drive, was the most beautiful and revolutionary ship ever built. Aesthetics and technology were closed books to him, and had he had it his way, burned and buried books as well. It mattered even less to him that Zaphod Beeblebrox was aboard. Zaphod Beeblebrox was now the ex-president of the galaxy, and though every police force in the galaxy was currently pursuing both him and his ship that he had stolen, the Vogon was not interested. He had other fish to fry. It has been said that Vogons are not above a little bribery and corruption in the same way that the sea is not above the clouds, and this was certainly true in his case. When he heard the words integrity or moral rectitude, he reached for his dictionary, and when he heard the chink of ready money in large quantities, he reached for the rule book and threw it away. In seeking so implacably the destruction of the earth and all that therein lay, he was moving somewhat above and beyond the call of his professional duty. There was even some doubt as to whether the said bypass was actually going to be built, but the matter had been glossed over. He grunted a repellent grunt of satisfaction. "Computer," he croaked. Get me my brain care specialist on the line. Within a few seconds, the face of Gag Halfront appeared on the screen, smiling the smile of a man who knew he was 10 light years away from the Vogon face he was looking at. Mixed up somewhere in the smile was a glint of irony, too. Though the Vogon persistently referred to him as my private brain care specialist, there was not a lot of brain to take care of, and it was in fact Halfront who was employing the Vogon. He was paying him an awful lot of money to do some dirty work. As one of the galaxy's most prominent and successful psychiatrists, he and a consortium of his colleagues were quite prepared to spend an awful lot of money when it seemed that the entire future of psychiatry might be at stake. "Well," he said, "hello, my captain of Vogon's prosthetic, and how are we feeling today?" The Vogon captain told him that in the last few hours he had wiped out nearly half his crew in a disciplinary exercise. Halfrent's smile did not flicker for an instant. "Well," he said, "I think this is perfectly normal behavior for a Vogon, you know? The natural and healthy channeling of the aggressive instincts into acts of senseless violence." "That," rumbled the Vogon, "is what you always say." "Well, again," said Halfrent, "I think that this is perfectly normal behavior for a psychiatrist. Good. We're clearly both very well adjusted in our mental attitudes today. Now tell me, what news of the mission?" "We have located the ship." "Wonderful," said Halfrent. "Wonderful. And the occupants?" "The Earthman is there." "Excellent. And—" "A female from the same planet. They are the last." "Good, good," beamed Halfrent. "Who else?" "The man prefect." "Yes?" "And Zaphod Beeblebrox." For an instant, Halfrent's smile flickered. "Ah, yes," he said. "I had been expecting this. It is most regrettable." "A personal friend?" inquired the Vogon, who had heard the expression somewhere once and decided to try it out. No," said Halfrent. "In my profession, you know, we do not make personal friends." "Ah," grunted the Vogon. "Professional detachment." "No," said Halfrent cheerfully. "We just don't have the knack." He paused. His mouth continued to smile, but his eyes frowned slightly. "But Beeblebrox, you know," he said, "he is one of my most profitable clients. He has personality problems beyond the dreams of analysts." He toyed with this thought a little before reluctantly dismissing it. "Still," he said, "you're ready for your task?" "Yes." "Good. Destroy the ship immediately." "What about Beeblebrox?" "Well," said Halfront brightly, "Svod's just this guy, you know?" He vanished from the screen. The Vogon captain pressed a communicator button which connected him with the remains of his crew. "Attack," he said. At that precise moment, Zaphod Beeblebrox was in his cabin, swearing very loudly. 2 hours ago, he had said that they would go for a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe, whereupon he had a blazing row with the ship's computer, and stormed off to his cabin shouting that he would work out the improbability factors with a pencil. The Heart of Gold's improbability drive made it the most powerful and unpredictable ship in existence. There was nothing it couldn't do, provided you knew exactly how improbable it was that the thing you wanted it to do would even happen. He had stolen it when, as president, he was meant to be launching it. He didn't know exactly why he had stolen it, except that he liked it. He didn't know why he had become president of the galaxy, except that it seemed a fun thing to be. He did know that there were better reasons than these, but that they were buried in a dark, locked-off section of his two brains. He wished the dark, locked-off section of his two brains would go away, because they occasionally surfaced momentarily and put strange thoughts into the light, fun sections of his mind, and tried to deflect him from what he saw as being the basic business of his life, which was to have a wonderfully good time. At the moment, he was not having a wonderfully good time. He had run out of patience and pencils and was feeling very hungry. "Starpox!" he shouted. At that same precise moment, Ford Prefect was in midair. This was not because of anything wrong with the ship's artificial gravity field, but because he was leaping down the stairwell which led to the ship's personal cabins. It was a very high jump to do in one bound, and he landed awkwardly, stumbled, recovered, raced down the corridor, sending a couple of miniature service robots flying, skidded down the corner, burst into Zaphod's door, and explained what was on his mind. "Vogons," he said. A short while before this, Arthur Dent had set out from his cabin in search of a cup of tea. It was not a quest he embarked upon with a great deal of optimism, because he knew that the only source of hot drinks on the entire ship was a benighted piece of equipment produced by the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation. It was called a nutrimatic drinks synthesizer, and he had encountered it before. It claimed to produce the widest possible range of drinks personally matched to the taste and metabolism of whoever cared to use it. When put to the test, however, it invariably produced a plastic cup filled with a liquid which was almost, but not quite, entirely unlike tea. He attempted to reason with the thing. "Tea," he said. "Share and enjoy," the machine replied, and provided him with yet another cup of the sickly liquid. He threw it away. "Share and enjoy," the machine repeated, and produced another one. Share and enjoy is the company motto of the hugely successful Sirius Cybernetics Corporation Complaints Division, which now covers the major land masses of 3 medium-sized planets, and is the only part of the corporation to have shown a consistent profit in recent years. The motto stands, or rather, stood, in 3-mile-high illuminated letters near the Complaints Department spaceport on Edrax. Unfortunately, its weight was such that shortly after it was erected, the ground beneath the letters caved in and they dropped for nearly half their length through the offices of many talented young complaints executives, now deceased. The protruding upper halves of the letters now appear, in the local language, to read, "Go stick your head in a pig," and are no longer illuminated, except at times of special celebration. Arthur threw away a 6th cup of the liquid. "Listen, you machine," he said. "You claim you can synthesize any drink in existence, so why do you keep giving me the same undrinkable stuff?" "Nutrition and pleasurable sense data," burbled the machine. "Share and enjoy. It tastes filthy." "If you have enjoyed the experience of this drink," continued the machine, "why not share it with your friends?" "Because," said Arthur tartly, "I want to keep them. Will you try to comprehend what I'm telling you? That drink, said the machine sweetly, "was individually tailored to meet your personal requirements for nutrition and pleasure." "Ah," said Arthur, "so I'm a masochist on a diet, am I?" "Share and enjoy." "Oh, shut up." "Will that be all?" Arthur decided to give up. "Yes," he said. Then he decided he'd be damned if he'd give up. "No," he said. "Look, it's very, very simple. All I want is a cup of tea. You're going to make one for me. Keep quiet and listen." And he sat. He told the Nutrimatic about India. He told it about China. He told it about Ceylon. He told it about broad leaves drying in the sun. He told it about silver teapots. He told it about summer afternoons on the lawn. He told it about putting in the milk before the tea so it wouldn't get scalded. He even told it briefly about the history of the East India Company. "So that's it, is it?" said the Nutrimatic when he had finished. "Yes," said Arthur. "That is what I want." "You want the taste of dried leaves boiled in water?" Yes, with milk. Squirted out of a cow." "Well, in a manner of speaking, I suppose." "I'm going to need some help with this one," said the machine tersely. All the cheerful burbling had dropped out of its voice, and it now meant business. "Well, anything I can do," said Arthur. "You've done quite enough," the Nutrimatic informed him. It summoned up the ship's computer. "Hi there," said the ship's computer. The Nutrimatic explained about tea to the ship's computer. The computer boggled, linked logic circuits with the Nutrimatic, and together they lapsed into a grim silence. Arthur watched and waited for a while, but nothing further happened. He thumped it, but still nothing happened. Eventually he gave up and wandered up to the bridge. In the empty waste of space, the Heart of Gold hung still. Around it blazed the billion pinpricks of the galaxy. Towards it crept the ugly yellow lump of the Vogon ship. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. "Does anyone have a kettle?" Arthur asked as he walked onto the bridge, and instantly began to wonder why Trillian was yelling at the computer to talk to her. Ford was thumping it, and Zafod was kicking it, and also why there was a nasty yellow lump on the vision screen. He put down the empty cup he was carrying and walked over to them. "Hello?" he said. At that moment, Zafod flung himself over to the polished marble surfaces that contained the instruments that controlled the conventional photon drive. They materialized beneath his hands, and he flipped over to manual control. He pushed, he pulled, he pressed, and he swore. The photon drive gave a sickly shudder and then cut out again. "Something up?" said Arthur. "Hey, did you hear that?" muttered Zafod as he leapt over now for the controls on the infinite improbability drive. "The monkey spoke!" The improbability drive gave 2 small whines and then also cut out. "Pure history, man," said Zafod, kicking the improbability drive. "A talking monkey." "If you're upset about something," said Arthur. "Vogons," snapped Ford. "We're under attack." Arthur gibbered. "Well, what are you doing? Let's get out of here." "Can't. Computer's jammed." "Jammed?" "It says all its circuits are occupied. There's no power anywhere in the ship." Ford moved away from the computer terminal, wiped his sleeve across his forehead, and slumped back against the wall. "Nothing we can do," he said. He glared at nothing and bit his lip. When Arthur had been a boy at school, long before the Earth had been demolished, he had used to play football. He had not been at all good at it, and his particular specialty had been scoring own goals in important matches. Whenever this happened, he used to experience a peculiar tingling around the back of his neck that would slowly creep up across his cheeks and heat his brow. The image of mud and grass and lots of little jeering boys flinging it at him suddenly came vividly to his mind at this moment. A peculiar tingling sensation at the back of his neck was creeping up across his cheeks and heating his brow. He started to speak and stopped. He started to speak again and stopped again. Finally, he managed to speak. He said. He cleared his throat. "Tell me," he continued, and said it so nervously that the others all turned to stare at him. He glanced at the approaching yellow blob on the vision screen. Tell me," he said again, "did the computer say what was occupying it? I just asked out of interest." Their eyes were riveted on him. "And, well, that's it, really. Just asking." Claude put out a hand and held Arthur by the scruff of the neck. "What have you done to it, monkey man?" he breathed. "Well," said Arthur, "nothing, in fact. It's just that I think a short while ago it was trying to work out how to..." "Yes?" "Make some tea." "That's right, guys," the computer sang out suddenly. "Just coping with the problem right now, and wow, it's a biggie. Be with you in a while." It lapsed back into a silence that was only matched for sheer intensity by the silence of the three people staring at Arthur Dent. As if to relieve the tension, the Vogons chose that moment to start firing. The ship shook, the ship thundered. Outside, the inch-thick force shield around it blistered, crackled, and spat under the barrage of a dozen 30 megahertz definite kill Photrazon cannon, and looked as if it wouldn't be around for long. 4 minutes is how long Ford Prefect gave it. 3 minutes and 50 seconds, he said a short while later. 45 seconds, he added at the appropriate time. He flickered idly at some useless switches, then gave Arthur an unfriendly look. "Dying for a cup of tea, eh?" he said. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. "Will you stop counting?" snarled Safad. "Yes," said Ford Prefect, "in 3 minutes and 35 seconds. Aboard the Vogon ship, prosthetic Vogon Jolts was puzzled. He had expected a chase. He had expected an exciting grapple with tractor beams. He had expected to have to use the specially installed sub-cyclic normality Acertitron to counter the Heart of Gold's infinite improbability drive. But the sub-cyclic normality Acertitron lay idle, as the Heart of Gold just sat there and took it. A dozen 30 megahertz definite kill Photrazon cannon continued to blaze away at the Heart of Gold, and still it just sat there and took it. He tested every sensor at his disposal to see if there was any subtle trickery afoot, but no subtle trickery was to be found. He didn't know about the tea, of course, nor did he know exactly how the occupants of the Heart of Gold were spending the last 3 minutes and 30 seconds of life they had left to spend. Quite how Zafad Beeblebrox arrived at the idea of holding a seance at this point is something he was never quite clear on. Obviously, the subject of death was in the air, but more as something to be avoided than harped upon. Possibly the horror that Zafad experienced at the prospect of being reunited with his deceased relatives led on to the thought that they might just feel the same way about him, and, what's more, be able to do something about helping to postpone this reunion. Or again, it might just have been one of those strange promptings that occasionally surface from that dark area of his mind that he had inexplicably locked off prior to becoming president of the galaxy. "You want to talk to your great-grandfather?" boggled Ford. "Yeah. Does it have to be now?" The ship continued to shake and thunder. The temperature was rising, the light was getting dimmer, all the energy the computer didn't require for thinking about tea was being pumped into the rapidly fading force field. "Yeah," insisted Ford. "Listen, Ford, I think you may be able to help us." "Are you sure you mean think? Pick your words with care. Suggest something else we can do." Well, okay. Round the central console. Now, come on. Trillion, Monkey Man, move." They clustered around the central console in confusion, sat down, and feeling exceptionally foolish, held hands. With his third hand, Fort Zafad turned off the lights. Darkness gripped the ship. Outside, the thunderous roar of the definite kill cannon continued to rip at the force field. Concentrate, hissed Zafad, on his name. What is it? Asked Ford. Zafad Beeblebrox the Fourth. What? Zafad Beeblebrox the Fourth. Concentrate. The fourth? Yeah. Listen, I'm Zafad Beeblebrox. My father was Zafad Beeblebrox the Second. My grandfather is Zafad Beeblebrox the Third. What? It was an accident with a contraceptive and a time machine. Now concentrate. 3 minutes, said Ford Prefect. Why, said Arthur Dent, are we doing this? Shut up, suggested Zafad Beeblebrox. Trillian said nothing. What, she thought, was there to say? The only light on the bridge came from 2 dim red triangles in a far corner where Marvin the paranoid android sat slumped, ignoring all and ignored by all, in a private and rather unpleasant world of his own. Around the central console, 4 figures hunched in tight concentration, trying to blot from their minds the terrifying shuddering of the ship and the fearful roar that echoed through it. They concentrated. Still they concentrated. And still they concentrated. The seconds ticked by. On Zafad's brows stood beads of sweat, first of concentration, then of frustration, and finally of embarrassment. At last he let out a cry of anger, snatched back his hands from Trillian and Ford, and stabbed at the light switch. I was beginning to think you'd never turn the lights on, said a voice. No, not too bright, please. My eyes aren't what they once were. 4 figures jolted upright in their seats. Slowly they turned their heads to look, though their scalps showed a distinct propensity to try and stay in the same place. Now, who disturbs me at this time? Said the small, bent, gaunt figure, standing by the sprays of fern at the far end of the bridge. His 2 small, wispy-haired heads looked so ancient that they seemed they might hold dim memories of the birth of the galaxies themselves. One lolled in sleep, the other squinted sharply at them. If his eyes weren't what they once were, they must have been diamond cutters. Zafad stuttered nervously for a second. He gave the intricate little double nod, which is the traditional Bedigiusian gesture of familial respect. Oh, hi, great-granddad, he breathed. The little old figure moved closer toward him. He peered through the dim light. He thrust out a bony figure at his great-grandson. Ah, he snapped. Zafad Beeblebrox, the last of our great line. Zafad Beeblebrox, the nothingth. The first. The nothingth, spat the figure. Zafad hated his voice. It always seemed to him to screech like fingernails across the blackboard of what he liked to think of as his soul. He shifted awkwardly in his seat. Yeah, he muttered. Look, I'm really sorry about the flowers. I meant to send them along, but, you know, the shop was fresh out of wreaths and... You forgot, snapped Zafad Beeblebrox the Fourth. Well, too busy. Never think of other people. The living are all the same. 2 minutes, Zafad whispered Ford in an odd whisper. Zafad fidgeted nervously. Yeah, but I did mean to send them, he said. And I'll write to my great-grandmother as well, just as soon as we get out of this. Your great-grandmother, mused the gaunt little figure to himself. Yeah, said Zafad. How is she? Tell you what, I'll go and see her, but first we've just gotta... Your late great-grandmother and I are very well, rasped Zafad Beeblebrox the Fourth. Ah, oh. But very disappointed in you, young Zafad. Yeah, well, Zafad felt strangely powerless to take charge of this conversation, and Ford's heavy breathing at his side told him that the seconds were ticking away fast. The noise and the shaking had reached terrifying proportions. He saw Trillian's and Arthur's faces white and unblinking in the gloom. Great-grandfather, we've been following your progress with considerable despondency. Yeah, look, just at the moment, you see, not to say contempt. Could you sort of listen for a moment? I mean, what exactly are you doing with your life? I'm being attacked by a Vogon fleet, cried Zafad. It was an exaggeration, but it was his only opportunity so far of getting the basic point of the exercise across. Doesn't surprise me in the least, said the little old figure with a shrug. Only it's happening right now, you see, insisted Zaphod feverishly. The spectral ancestor nodded, picked up the cup Arthur Dent had brought in, and looked at it with interest. Great-granddad, did you know, interrupted the ghostly figure, fixing Zaphod with a stern look, the Betelgeuse 5 has now developed a very slight eccentricity in its orbit? Zaphod didn't, and found the information hard to concentrate on, what with all the noise and the imminence of death and so on. No. Look, he said. Me spinning in my grave, barked the ancestor. He slammed the cup down and pointed a quivering, stick-like see-through finger at Zaphod. Your fault, he screeched. 1 minute 30, muttered Ford, his head in his hands. Yeah, look, great-granddad, can you actually help? Because... Help! Exclaimed the old man as if he'd been asked for a weasel. Yeah, help, and like, now, 'cause otherwise... Help! Repeated the old man as if he'd been asked for a lightly grilled weasel in a bun with french fries. He stood amazed. You go swanning your way around the galaxy with your... The ancestor waved a contemptuous hand. With your disreputable friends, too busy to put flowers on my grave. The plastic ones would have been quite appropriate from you, but no. Too busy, too modern, too skeptical. Till you suddenly find yourself in a bit of a fix and come over suddenly all astrally minded. He shook his head, carefully so as not to disturb the slumber of the other one, which was already becoming restive. Well, I don't know, young Zaphod, he continued. I think I'll have to think about this one. 1 minute 10, said Ford hollowly. Zaphod Beeblebrox IV peered at him curiously. Why does that man keep talking in numbers? He said. Those numbers, said Zaphod tersely, are the time we've got left to live. Oh, said his great-grandfather. He grunted to himself. Doesn't apply to me, of course, he said and moved off to a dimmer recess of the bridge in search of something else to poke around at. Zaphod felt he was teetering on the edge of madness and wondered if he shouldn't just jump over and have done with it. Great-grandfather, he said, it applies to us. We are still alive and are about to lose our lives. Good job, too. What? What use is your life to anyone? When I think of what you've done and what you've made of it, the phrase pig's ear comes irresistibly to mind. But I was president of the galaxy, man. Huh, muttered his ancestor. What kind of a job is that for a Beeblebrox? Hey, what? Only president, you know, of the whole galaxy. Conceited little mega-puppy. Zaphod blinked in bewilderment. Hey, what are you at, man? I mean, great-grandfather? The hunched-up little figure stalked up to his great-grandson and tapped him sternly on the knee. This had the effect of reminding Zaphod that he was talking to a ghost because he didn't feel a thing. You know, and I know, what being president means, young Zaphod. You know because you've been it, and I know because I'm dead, and it gives one such a wonderfully uncluttered perspective. We have a saying up here, life is wasted on the living. Yeah, said Zaphod bitterly. Very good. Very deep. Right now I need aphorisms like I need holes in my heads. 50 seconds, grunted Ford Prefect. Where was I? Said Zaphod Beeblebrox IV. Pontificating, said Zaphod Beeblebrox. Oh, yes. Can this guy, muttered Ford quietly to Zaphod, actually in fact help us? Nobody else can, whispered Zaphod. Ford nodded despondently. Zaphod, the ghost was saying, you became president of the galaxy for a reason. Have you forgotten? Could we go into this later? Have you forgotten? Insisted the ghost. Yeah, of course I forgot. I had to forget. They screen your brain when you get the job, you know. If they'd found my head full of tricksy ideas, I'd have been out on the streets again with nothing but a fat pension, secretarial staff, a fleet of ships, and a couple of slit throats. Ah, nodded the ghost in satisfaction. And you do remember. He paused for a moment. Good, he said, and the noise stopped. 48 seconds, said Ford. He looked again at his watch and tapped it. He looked up. Hey, the noise has stopped, he said. A mischievous twinkle gleamed in the ghost's hard little eyes. Slow down time for a moment, He said, "Just for a moment, you understand. I would hate you to miss all I have to say." "No, you listen to me, see-through old bat," said Zafad, leaping out of his chair. A, thanks for stopping time and all that. Great, terrific, wonderful. But B, no thanks for the homily, right? I don't know what this great thing I'm meant to be doing is, and it looks to me as if I was supposed to not know. And I resent that, right? The old me knew. The old me cared. Fine, so far so good. Except that the old me cared so much that he actually got inside his own brain, my own brain, and locked off the bits that I knew and cared, because if I knew and cared, I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to go and be president, and I wouldn't be able to steal the ship, which must be the important thing. But this former self of mine killed himself off, didn't he, by changing my brain? Okay, that was his choice. This new me has his own choices to make, and by a strange coincidence, those choices involve not knowing and not caring about this big number, whatever it is. That's what he wanted, that's what he got. Except this old self of mine tried to leave himself in control, leaving orders for me in the bit of my brain he locked off. Well, I don't want to know, and I don't want to hear them. That's my choice. I'm not going to be anybody's puppet, particularly not my own. Safad banged on the console in fury, oblivious of the dumbfounded looks he was attracting. The old me is dead, he raved. Killed himself. The dead shouldn't hang about trying to interfere with the living. And yet you summoned me up to help you out of a scrape, said the ghost. Ah, said Safad, sitting down again. Well, that's different, isn't it? He grinned at Trillian weakly. Safad, rasped the apparition. I think the only reason I waste my breath on you is that being dead, I don't have any other use for it. Okay, said Safad. Why don't you tell me what the big secret is? Try me. Safad. You knew when you were president of the galaxy, as did Yuden ranks before you, that the president is nothing. A cipher. Somewhere in the shadows behind is another man, being something, with ultimate power. That man, or being, or something, you must find. The man who controls the galaxy, and, we suspect, others. Possibly the entire universe. Why? Why? Exclaimed an astonished ghost. Why? Look around you, lad. Does it look to you as if it's in very good hands? It's all right. The old ghost glowered at him. I will not argue with you. You will simply take this ship, this improbability drive ship, to where it is needed. You will do it. Don't think you can escape your purpose. The improbability field controls you. You are in its grip. What's this? He was standing tapping at one of the terminals of Eddie, the shipboard computer. Safad told him. What's it doing? It is trying, said Safad with wonderful restraint, to make tea. Good, said his great-grandfather. I approve of that. Now, Safad, he said, turning and wagging a finger at him. I don't know if you're really capable of succeeding in your job. I think you will not be able to avoid it. However, I am too long dead and too tired to care as much as I did. The principal reason I am helping you now is that I couldn't bear the thought of you and your modern friends slouching about up here. Understood? Yeah, thanks a bundle. Oh, and Safad? Yeah? You ever find you need help again, you know, you're in trouble, need a hand out of a tight corner? Yes? Please don't hesitate to get lost. Within the space of 1 second, a bolt of light flashed from the wizened old ghost's hands to the computer. The ghost vanished, the bridge filled with billowing smoke, and the heart of gold leapt in an unknown distance through the dimensions of time and space. End of chapter 3. Dun da da da. This will make you famous, reread. Dude, stop, you're scaring me. Oh, the ghost. Yeah, cool. That was fun. I feel like each one of these reading sessions are getting better and better. Da, 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 da. All right, let me put down this book here, and just talk to y'all folks for a second. Let me get a drink of water really quick. What's up, Peculiar saying? You know, I was thinking about that too when I said that. I wish I read that for a little, like a half second more, before I like said it out loud, because I definitely would have been like, oh, good. Good. Yeah. Brit's screwing it up again. Hello, hello. Alright, cool. Well, I think we're pretty much good for the reading. Went a little bit over. Well, no. I mean, like, we started about 10 minutes in, so it was about an hour total. So I'll get the video up on YouTube after this. Probably tomorrow. But yeah, I have a new BRB screen. Or well, it's not like a new, but it's more edited. So you've seen like my starting soon and my endings, and you know, this one's a little bit like it's, I don't know. You'll see. I got some stuff on there, and I'm just gonna be on there for a second whenever I'm like switching over to probably play some Elden Ring on our New Game Plus that we started yesterday or Friday. Yeah, we'll hang out a little bit, and then yeah, we'll just go from there. I don't really have any set stuff going on tonight, so. All right, I'm gonna head out of here. I hope you guys all have a great night, and if anybody is staying tuned, I hope you stay tuned, play some games and stuff. But yeah, just another reminder for YouTube, I put all the past VODs on here for the reading, and then Discord, I put like pretty much, you know, like schedule if I'm about to go live for the reading streams. I don't like add everyone for every single stream I do, just for like the reading ones, so you don't miss them. But yeah, all right, I'm gonna head out of here, and at least as far as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy goes. Follow me. Oh, thanks, Sean. Thanks, Sean. All right, adios. Adios. Dun 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 dun. Bum 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 bum. Dun 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 dun. Goodbye.